One of my favorite charts is called the personal responsibility chart. I love it because it's a deep dive into the belief systems that are tied to responsibility and how out of our belief systems, our behavior arises. So when we're in a state called other directed, we're actually in a state of mind where we believe that we have no choice, that we have to do something. Sometimes we're seeing an authority figure that's actually really outside of us, like a boss or the IRS. But often it's an authority figure that we've internalized inside of our own heads, like Sister Mary Josephine from second grade or your mother or father. When we believe that we have no choice, one of the reactions that we could have is to comply resentfully. And when we do, this is a really key thing, we're completely unaware of how we don't feel responsible for a number of things. We don't feel responsible for the tasks in front of us. We don't feel responsible for the relationships we have, nor do we feel responsible for our mood and our own consequences. I'm going to give you an example, so don't worry if this sounds a little cerebral right now. When we're resentfully complying from this place of powerlessness, we're actually acting and feeling like a victim to ourselves and others. Now, if we don't decide to resentfully comply, what we'll often do is rebel and resist. And in that instance, we don't feel responsible for our tasks, for our relationships, or our outcomes either. And we're actually coming from sort of a mean-spirited place of, no, I won't, you can't make me, I'll show you. I was on a date one time with this man who didn't wear his safety belt, and I asked him, how come you don't wear your safety belt? I'm just curious. And his reaction was, I'm not letting the government control me. And I said, the government isn't even in the car with us. That's an example of an unconsciously other-directed exchange where the person is unaware that he's in reaction as opposed to in response with free choice. My sister called me one day and she says, I'm in a little tiff with my mother-in-law, and I'm just conscious enough to know that I'm probably a part of the problem, and I'm willing to look at it. So will you help me with it? And I said, okay, what's going on? And she said, every year at Thanksgiving, on Greg's side of the family, which is her husband, we take turns on who's going to host the dinner. And she said, this year I volunteered to do it. And I said, so what's the problem? And she said, well, I asked my mother-in-law what time they'd leave that day. Now, I want you to know that my sister, she likes to come to my house on Thanksgiving because we do games after everyone's had their dinners around 7 o'clock. And so she had that in the back of her mind, but she hadn't told anybody that. So even though she'd volunteered for the dinner, she started asking her mother-in-law, hey, what time do you guys think you're going to leave? What time do you guys think you'll be ready to clear out? And her mother-in-law is like, why do I have to tell you that? You know? And my sister got defensive and said, well, what's wrong with asking that? I've agreed to cook the dinner, haven't I? And they're getting into this little squabble. And so about then, my sister launches into this rant about, my mother-in-law is always trying to control me. I don't know why she won't cooperate with me. And she's all upset about it. And I said, okay, first of all, let's just slow down and look at this. Did you even want to do Thanksgiving? And she paused and said, well, I thought I should. Now, whenever we say I should, I have to, I ought to, I need to, I'm supposed to, I will try, or I can't, those are just clues that we're in the other-directed belief system. So what I want to share with you is the other side of that personal responsibility chart, and when I do, we'll continue this story. Now I'm going to talk about the self-directed side of this model. This is whenever we remember that we always have autonomy, we always have power and choice. We have these even under the most dire circumstances. There are stories about people in Auschwitz, Germany, in the concentration camps who exercised the use of their power within, even in those conditions. Because we always have choice. We choose what we're going to cause, what we're going to feel, who we're going to be, what we're showing up for. Think about Nelson Mandela, who went through 28 years of imprisonment and didn't lose his mind. He came out a strong leader. When I remember that I have choices, one attitude I can take, which is a response as opposed to a reaction to an authority figure, is that I can agree to do something. But when I agree from this side, I'm actually aware of all the consequences and I'm willing to accept all of them. And I have a feeling of responsibility for the task, for the relationship, for my own mood, and all other outcomes. And that's really what it means to be accountable. We can't truly hold other people accountable because accountability is an inside job. Accountability is when my beliefs, my attitudes, my responses, my feelings, and my behavior all line up. And when I'm in that place, I mean what I say and I say what I mean. That's what it means to be in alignment. When you think about your life, if you find yourself thinking, I ought to, I should, I need to, I have to, you just haven't made sure that you're making decisions from this self-directed side. That's all that means. It doesn't even mean no or yes yet, because you've not taken the time to consider some of the important things. And those phrases are a good clue to watch for along with your body language and your tone of voice. When I'm in this self-directed side, I can also say no or disagree. And I'm also willing to consider and accept all the consequences of that decision. For example, sometimes we say no to something because of our priorities or because it conflicts with our own value system, and our decision is for our reasons, not in reaction against someone else. It may just be the right or fair thing to do, but we're coming from this more mature self, not from that fearful, disempowered, and power-under self. So if you notice, agree and disagree look a lot like comply and rebel on the surface, right? The behavior. If I agree to clean the room or I comply resentfully with cleaning the room's getting cleaned. But those two decisions feel very different. When someone is rebelling or complying resentfully, everyone can feel it if they even tune in a little. You can see it in the body language and the tone of voice, in addition to the words that I mentioned about I have to or I should. It sounds like, all right, fine, I'll do it. And you're aware on some level, even if it's often unconscious, okay, I'm going to get about 50% output. And often we settle for that. What's different is not exactly about the behavior, it's about the intention behind the behavior and the centeredness behind it or the lack thereof. In other directed, there's self-betrayal and everyone pays a price, even though it can even appear noble sometimes. So when we're in self-directed mind, we can either agree or disagree, but we also have what's called third option, which stands for multiple options, even beyond three. Because we're not in knee-jerk reactions. We're doing instead thoughtful, mindful contemplation in this mindset. And all that means is that I'm pausing just a breath to ask myself, what am I feeling and what do I want? And then we can create other options that aren't necessarily yes or no. So my sister, what happened with her is that when I asked her, did you really want to do Thanksgiving this year? And she said, well, I thought I should. I said, let's just pretend you haven't made the decision yet and that you're still in the deciding place. So just take a breath and ask yourself, what do I feel about this? What do I want? And she said, I realize I really do want to do the dinner, but I'm also conscious in this moment that I want to do it only if everyone's out of the house by 6:30 so I can make it to your house for game night. Like she'd forgotten to notice that. And if she had noticed it, she could have said to her husband's family, you know what, I'd really love to have it at my house this year, but only if it could be done by 6:30 or if you guys would agree to continue the party at that time without me. The point is that she would have been fully accountable and all of them could have then negotiated a solution that would work for all of them. And if it didn't work for her to do the holiday, maybe someone else would take it on. But do you see how different it would go? But what was happening is that on some level, my sister wasn't feeling great about her decision. She was feeling victimized by it and by her mother-in-law, and she was resentful about it. So when we're in the other directed side, we're self-betraying. And when we do that, we always distort the facts. We demonize others and we martyr or rile ourselves up. The reason we call the feelings a blind spot is really obvious in this example with my sister. She was the author of the problems because she wasn't deciding from self-directed, but she couldn't see that she was the author of this squabble. She thought that it was her mother-in-law that was causing the problem. And this goes on all the time unless we have conscious self and relationship awareness. I'll give you one last story that's work-related. A woman I was working with got fired from her job, and she said to me, I don't know what happened. She said that she had asked her boss off of work 2 months in advance for a vacation, and her boss said no problem. And so she had it on her calendar. And about a week before her vacation, she goes to her boss and says, now, just remember, I'm going on vacation next week. And her boss says, well, that's fine, but I've got these 10 things that you've got to get done before you go. So this woman went to that place of, I have to do those. I don't have a choice. So what she did is she did 8 of the 10 things on the list, and she didn't get to the other two. Now, in her mind, she thought, I shouldn't even have to do these at all. I got permission 2 months ago to go on vacation. What's the deal with this? She's lucky that I'm doing 8 of them. So part of her resentfully complied and part of her rebelled and resisted, and she ended up losing her job and did not see her own part in it. Now, what she could have done had she been more aware in that moment is when her boss said, you've got to do these 10 things before you can go on vacation. She could have sat with that, even if just for a few breaths. And she could have asked herself, what am I feeling about this and what do I want? And if she had stayed with that just a little bit, she would have probably gone to her boss and either said, yes, I'm willing, and would have been fully willing because of her own motives and her own values and her own alignment. Or she might have said no, but managed the tasks, the conversation around the tasks, around the relationship, and around the outcomes by having a real open communication about it, sharing why she's saying no. Or she could even consider other options like, you know what, I want to be able to help you complete these 10 things, but I want to make sure that they're not contingent on my vacation. I'll do everything I can to complete them myself and to get other people on board with them, or commit to doing the top ones first and let you know if I can't get to some of them. The point is, there are a lot of things that she could have done, but because she was not willing to slip into the self-directed side, she actually caused harm to herself and everyone else too. When we're in other directed, it's a felt thing in the team. Even if it looks like we're trying our hardest or doing the good stuff, even if she'd done all 10 of those assignments and kept her job, but had her resentment, there are a lot of negative consequences that would have come from that and have an effect on her, her coworkers, her boss, and even probably the customers, everything. So you can see how important it is to recognize when we're doing this, because this is really important to how you maintain your own alignment and operate from your own power within so that you only cause good.
And I really appreciate the fact that Lifework works on you as a blueprint so that you get your purpose, and then you can figure out how can I make my purpose part of my vision for my daily work. And all the pieces of that have to do with, you have to understand that each individual is either other-directed or self-directed. And some people don't realize that they're being other-directed. And sometimes it's a macho thing, sometimes it's just, I don't have a good pattern, and they do these things. But with this, we develop an ability to talk about it and possibly change the patterns. And then there's these aha moments where people, when they see this, they go, well, you know, maybe I could change this rather than continue to act. And they do have a lot of light bulbs going off.